Vladimir Putin just put out an interview with the Valdai Discussion Club. And you can find this on YouTube. I'm going to have the link in the description. But it's really interesting as to what the media says and what is actually coming from the horse's mouth, coming from the different politicians around the world. There's a lot of politicians who immediately made interviews and videos about how they were acknowledging or congratulating President Trump on his recent election. And this was one of the most interesting interviews I saw because so many people are afraid. And I think it's really important to see the facts, see the truth of the matter when you're dealing with things that you're afraid of or things that people are so dang upset about and so bent out of shape about. And so as we listen to this interview, I hope it provides a little bit of insight to somebody out there. The reason we're listening to it is because I own a translation and interpretation company. We're involved in a lot of these political meetings where people are interpreting stuff, interpreting political whatever. It doesn't matter if it's an energy bill or if it's a diplomatic meeting of some kind, and we're involved in some of those. And document translation that has to do with us. The fact I speak Russian, I can understand this interview, and I'm from Texas, and there's a couple of things mentioned about Texas in this video, and so it just was really interesting, especially on the front of leadership and politics. So just going to go through start the video now and provide a few comments along the way.
Владимир Владимирович, большое событие вчера было. Весь мир следил, затаив дыхание. Соединенные Штаты выбрали нового президента. На вашем президентском веку это 6-й.
So this is really funny. It's not how they say it. The Russian interviewer makes no comical whatsoever sense of how funny this is, but he's like, "This is your 6th president that you have seen in office." Normally, so our presidents in the United States, they last for 2 terms, and President Putin has been there for 6 different presidents the entire time. Sometimes there's been another person in between his presidencies. I don't know what they really call them in Russia, but anyways, he's been there for 6 presidents, and that's quite a few presidents to be the leader of Russia for, having been through like a cycle of 6 leaders in a different country and one of the other most powerful countries in the world.
Ну, он же 4-й, но так бывает. У вас какие-то остались воспоминания, может, о ком-то из них более приятные, менее приятные, с кем было работать интереснее?
He's just asking here, who's been the most interesting to work with? Do you have any experience? Do you have any insights on the previous presidencies and your experience with working with them?
Вы знаете, ведь вообще они все интересные люди. Трудно себе представить человека, который оказался бы на вершине власти в одной из ведущих стран мира и был бы абсолютно каким-то ничтожным или глупым, неинтересным человеком.
What he just said there is really funny because it's maybe not really funny, but I think it's very important. So many times in the media, people portray politicians as these evil, dumb, wicked, maybe not even humans. What he just said is like, well, all of the presidents that I've worked with and all the people in this category who I've worked with from there, they are intelligent. They don't get to that point of their career by being dumb, useless nothingnesses of humanity. And I think that was really a very cool compliment, because so many times in the media, what we're hearing is like, oh, this president is dumb. Like Biden, like lot of really bad things said about him. I mean, I don't know good or bad, and I don't know really true. I've never met the man in person. I can't really tell you. I can say, some of the politics are maybe worse, some of the politics are maybe better, but as far as who he is as a person, I really don't know. I have no clue because I've never met him in person. I can't make that judgment call really and truly. So this was a really interesting thing that he said, because a lot of times in this past 12 months of election noise, there's been a lot of politicians calling the other politician stupid, calling that person evil and wicked, and like he just says it plain, like, man, they're all interesting, sharp, smart people. They all were elected and got into that position, and not by merit somehow. And it's like they're all interesting and really, really cool to work with. So let's listen further.
Дело в том, что внутриполитическая культура в США такая, что она все становится, внутриполитическая борьба становится все острее и острее, используются всякие приемы оппонентами и политическими противниками действующего главы государства для того, чтобы их как-то подопустить, и причем используются такие инструменты, которые часто являются нелицеприятными и далеки от показателя вот этой политической культуры. Ну вот, не знаю, вот помните, на Буша сколько было нападок всяких. И он такой, значит, не грамотный, не интеллигентный, не знающий. Вранье все это. Значит, у нас очень много было противоречий. Я считаю, что, значит, с точки зрения отношения к России, вот, политики на российском направлении, многие из них, практически все, ну, я же говорил, все, что делалось в конечном итоге, в совокупности смотрелось как интервенция такая скрытая. Но в личностном плане, я вас уверяю, тот же Буш, который был до этого, значит, губернатором Техаса, это сложный штат, огромный, значит, он был успешным губернатором. И когда я с ним общался, уверяю вас, он ничем не уступает любому из сидящему в этом зале. И как бы его там не представляли в качестве.
So this was a really interesting point. So if you were old enough to remember President George Bush when he was in office, not senior, but the most recent George Bush in office, he's talking about him right now, and he's just saying that so many people said how dumb this person was as a president, but he said you wouldn't even, like, all the stuff that the media said, if you met this guy in person, you would have a totally different view about who he is and what he could do, what he did in his term, how he worked as a governor of the state of Texas, and how challenging it was to manage that state, because it's not an easy state to manage, and there's a lot of different economic factors and political challenges. And he's like, he managed that state, and he is incredibly, like, he's an intelligent, sharp person. Everything that the media said, everything that everybody wanted to say about who he was and how dumb he was, that's not true.
Какого-то человека с низким IQ и так далее. Также,
like, he has a low IQ, or he doesn't have any understanding of how to run a government. Like, he's like, all that stuff is just trash. I met the guy in person.
Как и любым из своих политических противников. Я вот знаю, я же с ним общался много лично. Я ночевал у него дома.
Now, this was a funny part. Я ночевал у его дома. He spent the night at George Bush's house, his ranch.
Раньше в Техасе.
In Texas, and that's crazy. Did you know that? I never knew that. I never knew that until I watched this video, and he said, President Vladimir Putin spent the night at the house of George Bush in there in Texas, in my home state.
Я встречался неоднократно с его родителями, и у них дома, и они приезжали ко мне.
This is even crazier. So he not only met George Bush, spent the night with George Bush in George Bush's house, hung out with him on his ranch in South Texas. George Bush introduced him to George Bush Sr., and he went to George Bush Sr.'s house and hung out with them.
И надо, вот я вам скажу, значит, разговаривал когда с его отцом, тоже бывшим президентом США, он уже не был, конечно, в это время президентом, он мне сказал искренне так, спокойно, он говорит, огромную ошибку мы совершили, что начали блокировать Олимпийские игры в Москве. Потом Россия начала то же самое делать в отношении Олимпийских игр. У нас такая чушь. Это вот он мне сказал лично.
I almost started speaking in Russian. It was really interesting what he said, that President Bush Sr. just said really peacefully and like with his own, it was his own opinion. I was like, man, it's really, really dumb that we decided that we made so much trouble for hosting the Olympics in the United States. And then he said, and then the same thing happened in America. I'm sorry, in Moscow. We just made this big deal so that they couldn't hold the Olympics in Moscow. And then he said vice versa. Then there was a big stink about everything, how they couldn't hold the Olympics in the United States.
Такая чушь, такая ошибка. Зачем мы это делаем?
So it was a really big mistake. Why would we do that?
И ничего. И все это продолжается. Под давлением извне Международный олимпийский комитет превратился, я не знаю, в каких-то, я не знаю, цирковых артистов просто. Коммерциализировали олимпийское движение полностью, уничтожают его своими руками. Но я к чему сейчас? Сейчас я не об этом, а о том, с какими людьми мне пришлось работать. Вот каждый из них – это личность. И человек, как бы не случайно попавший на этот Олимп.
А будущий президент с этой точки зрения как?
That was a really key thing he said. Like every single one of them, and I mean, he just repeats that idea. Every single one of them of the presidents of the United States have been intelligent. They didn't get to that level without merit.
Вы знаете, можно тоже как угодно к нему относиться, ведь все...
Now he's talking about the future upcoming President Trump.
Изначально, в первой его итерации президентской, говорили, что он бизнесмен в основном, и он мало чего в этом понимает в политике, он ошибок может наделать. Ну, во-первых, я вам могу сказать, его поведение в момент покушения на его жизнь, я не знаю, но на меня произвело это впечатление. Он мужественный человек.
That's a big compliment right there. That's a big compliment. He's like, that was actually, he carried himself well. When he was being when he was being assassinated, having those assassination attempts, not one, but multiple, but especially that one where he was in public, got hit by the bullet. He was like, he carried himself incredibly well.
И дело не только в поднятой руке и в призыве бороться за их общие идеалы. Дело не только в этом. Хотя это, конечно, знаете, на драйве, на таком, все как бы... Человек проявляет себя в условиях, в экстраординарных условиях. Вот здесь человек проявляет себя, и он себя проявил, на мой взгляд, очень правильным образом, мужественно.
Very interesting what he says there. Like he said that Trump carried himself in an extraordinary way. An extraordinary, almost heroic, honorable way. That's a really big compliment that he gave.
Как мужчина.
Like a man.
Что касается политики, вот в первой итерации, не знаю, он услышит, но я скажу, пожалуй, здесь. Говорю искренне абсолютно. У меня такое впечатление, что его затравили со всех сторон, не давали ему пошевелиться. Он боялся шаг сделать влево, вправо, лишнее слово сказать. Я не знаю, что сейчас будет происходить. Понятия не имею.
He was talking about Trump's first term, and he's like, well, in his first term as president, he was a little bit afraid to move forwards, backwards, left to right, not say the right words, not do the right thing, not make the right decision as a politician, and he was a little bit more reserved. But he's looking forward in this next 4 years, and he's like, I'm really not sure how this next 4 years is going to look with Trump.
Для него это все-таки последний срок. Ну, что он будет делать?
It's his last opportunity to be president.
Это его вопросы. Но то, что говорилось публично до сих пор, в основном я не хочу сейчас комментировать то, что было сказано в ходе избирательной борьбы. И я думаю, что сказано сознательно в борьбе за голоса избирателей, но неважно. А вот то, что было сказано по стремлению восстановить отношения с Россией, способствовать завершению украинского кризиса, мне, на мой взгляд, кажется, это заслуживает внимания, как минимум. И я, пользуясь случаем, хочу поздравить его с избранием на пост президента Соединенных Штатов Америки. Я уже говорил, что мы будем работать с любым главой государства, которому окажет доверие американский народ. Так будет действительно и на практике.
So he's just like, I'm congratulate President Trump on his accomplishment, becoming president again after this 4-year break, and they're ready to work with anyone, whatever government was going to be ruling in the United States, whatever kind of inclination, and he was really, he's like, I'm open to work with either side, whatever the government is over there, we're open to have conversations and to work with them. So that's really interesting. Really, the media doesn't seem to be posting this. It doesn't seem to be broadcasting this. But he's like, look, guys, we'll work with you. I understand if you're feeling like he's a liar, lying to the face. Everybody feels the same way. Okay, maybe not everybody. Maybe that's a blanket statement, but so many people feel the same way about politicians. If they're talking, they're lying. Like, that's how people feel about politicians. Not just in Russia, not just in Europe, not just in wherever else around the world, in the United States. That's just the way people feel about it. And so whether or not you feel that way about what he just said, what he's very clearly opinionated about is that they will work with anyone. Like, he's willing to pick up the phone and work with anyone. He doesn't have that grand disrespect for other nations. He's very, very clear that he has a high regard for whatever party would have been ruling in the United States, and is open to negotiate, work with, and create solutions.
А если он выполнит то, что все время сейчас говорил, вот буквально в ближайшее время до инаугурации позвонит вам и скажет: Владимир, давай встречаться.
Вы знаете, я не считаю зазорным и со своей стороны ему позвонить. Просто не делаю этого, потому что руководители западных государств с какого этапа они чуть ли не каждую неделю мне звонили, а потом прекратили. Не хотят, не надо. Мы, как видите, живы, здоровы, и ничего, и развиваемся, идем вперед. Если кто-то из них захочет возобновить контакты, я всегда говорил, хочу еще раз сказать, мы ничего против не имеем, пожалуйста. Будем контакты возобновлять и вести дискуссии.
So before they were contacting and communicating all the time, and then there was just a period they just stopped calling. So I was like, fine, if you guys don't want to talk to me anymore, we just won't talk, and we'll just kind of go forwards and continue to try to develop. And you guys try to develop. It's like, but I'm open to phone calls.
Желающих вести дискуссии много, вот здесь целый зал. Но если нет, мы будем с вами вести дискуссии.
То есть с Трампом готовы повести?
Готово.
Хорошо.
So in the end of it, he says, I'm fully open and willing to have conversations in and about the situations going on that concern both of our countries. But the main thing that I thought was really interesting about this video is not the politics. Again, I'd want to make sure that anybody watching this video is not going to start saying, "Well, you're for Vladimir Putin." I have nothing to do with Vladimir Putin. I'm from Texas. I'm a U.S. citizen. I run a translation and interpretation company, and we're just involved in some of these meetings, and that's why this thing comes up and it's interesting. But the main thing I think that would be helpful for people out there is to know that whether you like them or not, most politicians, most leaders for that matter, have gotten to their positions by some form of merit, whether it was grit, whether it's education and training and personal development, whether it's personal discipline that helped them to get where they are. They got there by some form of merit, and you can get there too. And if somebody does hold that position, there's still something we can learn from them, no matter if we like them or we don't like them, we don't like their politics or do like their politics. We can still learn a lot from them, and we can still create much better outcomes when we have more information about the people or the parties or the persons that we don't see eye to eye with. And so I thought it was a really cool interview about when the media has so much to say about everything's falling and the relationships are terrible. And Putin clearly here openly says, congratulations to President Trump. He acted like a man when he was under fire. He demonstrated skill. He got to his position by great merit. And by the way, so did Biden and all the other presidents that have come before him. And there's just so much that you can learn from the more humanity side of each of these presidents and each of these leaders of the countries, rather than just listening to the mainstream media and being swayed one direction or another. So really interesting. Thought I'd share a little bit about this interview and hope it's cool to somebody, or maybe just a little bit enlightening on the perspective of Putin on the recent United States elections.